He was just a single father trying to make ends meet, driving home after another exhausting shift when headlights caught something strange on the highway, a bloodied horse, barely breathing. He could have driven past like everyone else, but he didn't. What he didn't know was that saving that animal would unravel a secret, one that would bring a wealthy, mysterious family to his doorstep days later, with questions, offers, and a truth that could change his and his daughter's life forever. Why was the horse alone? Who really owns it? And what does this family want from a man who has nothing left to give, except his honesty and heart? A story of sacrifice and second chances. If you believe in the power of kindness and stories that heal the heart, consider subscribing. You won't want to miss what happens next. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, write your country name in the comments. Struggling single dad helps injured horse on highway. James's backstory. James Vince had always believed that life had a way of testing a person's resilience. He came from a family that, on the surface, seemed decent enough. His father, a man with grand aspirations, had once promised James and his sister Ava that they would grow up in a house full of love, respect, and warmth. But promises were broken long before James even had the chance to fully understand what they meant. James was just a child when his father abandoned their family, leaving them to fend for themselves in a world that seemed colder and harsher with every passing day. His father's departure was a wound that never fully healed. It left a scar that would linger in James's heart for years to come. His father had walked out on them without a second thought, vanishing into thin air with no explanation, no goodbye, and no plans to return. The silence that followed his absence was deafening. It was Ava who had to step up, despite being only 4 years older than James. She was only 10 when their father left, but in the blink of an eye, she became the person James relied on. The weight of responsibility fell heavily on her small shoulders, and yet she never once complained. Ava became his protector, his guiding light. She made sure he never felt alone, even in their most desperate moments. While James was still learning to navigate the world, Ava was teaching him life's most important lessons, about kindness, about resilience, and most importantly, about never becoming the kind of person their father had been. Ava had an innate ability to see the good in people, a trait that was sorely needed in their broken household. She showed James that, despite the mistakes of others, they could rise above it all. She taught him that, even though their father had made the worst kind of decision, they didn't have to follow that path. They could carve their own way, guided by their own moral compass. "Never be like him," Ava would say softly in moments of vulnerability, her voice steady but full of the weight of experience. "Be better, James. Be better than he ever was." James understood the weight of her words, even if he couldn't fully comprehend the depth of her sacrifice at the time. He didn't understand that she, too, was grieving. Ava had become both the mother and sister that he had lost when their father left, and she did so without hesitation. Her strength became the bedrock upon which their broken family was rebuilt. As time passed, things began to settle, at least on the surface. James grew older, and life became a series of routines: school, chores, and work. He took every job he could find, working tirelessly to help Ava support their mother. Their mother, once the heart of their home, had been consumed by her grief, her own personal battle too great to overcome. It was clear that she had never fully recovered from the abandonment of her husband, and so James and Ava took on more responsibility. But through it all, James learned the importance of hard work and dedication. It became the only way to keep things together, the only way to survive. Ava, ever the optimist, found ways to create moments of joy even in the most difficult times. She would take James on long walks, encouraging him to dream of a future where they weren't just surviving but thriving. She would often talk about her own dreams of a family, of finding someone who could provide her with the love and security they had always lacked. James, in his youthful naivety, never fully understood the weight of those dreams. He saw them as something distant, something far removed from the harsh reality of their daily lives. Years passed, and Ava did eventually find love. She married a man who was kind and steady, someone who seemed to give her the peace she had longed for. James watched from the sidelines, knowing that his sister's happiness was well earned, but feeling a pang of jealousy. He couldn't help but wonder if he would ever find something similar, a sense of belonging, a feeling of stability. James's life, however, was never easy. He continued to work long hours, sacrificing his own happiness for the sake of his family. He had always been focused on doing what needed to be done, without stopping to reflect on his own desires. It wasn't that he didn't want a family or a life of his own, but his responsibilities to Ava and their mother always came first. The thought of letting them down was too great a burden to bear. For a time, it seemed as though Ava's life was everything James had hoped for her. She was happy, and for the first time in years, James allowed himself to hope that things might finally be looking up. She was married to a man named Robert, a man who was steady, reliable, and loved her deeply. They had dreams of starting a family, and when Ava found out she was pregnant with their first child, it felt like the culmination of years of hardship finally giving way to happiness. But as quickly as happiness arrived, it was stolen away. Just 3 years into her marriage, Ava received the news that would shatter everything. Robert, her husband, had been serving in the army when the tragic news arrived. He had been killed during a military operation. The words felt like a punch to the gut. James had never seen Ava so broken. She had lost not just her husband, but her hope for the future, the dream of a family that would never come to fruition. The days that followed were a blur of grief, confusion, and shock. James watched helplessly as his sister struggled to cope with the devastating loss. She was no longer the woman who had always been the glue holding their family together. Instead, she was a shell of herself, racked with sorrow, consumed by the pain of her husband's untimely death. And now, on top of everything, she was pregnant, carrying the child they had both hoped for, but never imagined would come to be under such tragic circumstances. Suddenly, James found himself in a position he had never imagined. He was no longer just caring for Ava and their mother. He was now carrying the weight of an unborn child on his shoulders too. The loss of Robert had turned their world upside down, but it was clear that James was the only one who could hold things together. He had no choice but to step up, to take on more responsibility than he ever thought he could bear. James's focus shifted from simply surviving to ensuring that Ava and her unborn child would be provided for, that they would not be left to navigate the world alone. It wasn't just about providing financially, it was about being there for Ava, supporting her through the darkest time of her life and making sure that she didn't fall apart. In the face of tragedy, James found a renewed sense of purpose. It was no longer just about him or his past. It was about the future he would help create for Ava and her child. He had no illusions about how hard this would be, but he knew that he was capable of more than he ever thought possible. And in his heart, he made a promise to himself and to his sister that he would do whatever it took to ensure that, despite the tragedies they had faced, they would survive, rebuild, and find a way to keep going. The grief of losing Robert had devastated Ava in ways that no one, not even James, could have imagined. The light that had once filled her life seemed to have dimmed entirely. For months, Ava went through the motions, barely able to keep up with the tasks of everyday life. The excitement of her pregnancy faded as she was consumed by her loss. No matter how much James tried to console her, no matter how often he would sit beside her and remind her that she wasn't alone, it never seemed to be enough. Ava's heart, it seemed, had shattered beyond repair. James had always seen Ava as the pillar of strength in their family. She was the one who had carried them through their darkest days, teaching him everything he knew about resilience, compassion, and the importance of family. To see her so frail, to witness the grief consume her with such intensity, felt like losing her all over again. She was no longer the woman who had been the backbone of their family. She was a shadow of herself, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of her sorrow. And then, as if the universe had conspired to add more pain to her already heavy heart, Ava fell ill. It started with small signs: fatigue that wouldn't go away, a persistent cough that didn't seem to ease, and an overwhelming sense of weakness that seemed to cloud her every move. At first, James thought it was just the emotional toll of Robert's death taking its toll on her body. But as the weeks passed, Ava's condition only worsened. Her once vibrant eyes grew dull, and her skin took on a sickly pallor. It was clear that something more was happening, something that neither James nor Ava had prepared for. James watched helplessly as his sister's health deteriorated. It was as if the life force that had once filled her with such energy had been slowly drained away, leaving behind a woman he barely recognized. The doctors were at a loss, unable to offer a clear diagnosis. All they could do was prescribe medications and hope for the best, but none of it seemed to help. Ava's body was failing her, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. One evening, as James sat beside her bed watching her struggle to breathe, Ava turned to him with a look in her eyes that was both resolute and full of sorrow. She hadn't said much in the past few days, but there was something in her gaze now that made James's heart sink. He knew, without a doubt, that something important was coming. "James," Ava whispered, her voice weak but clear, "I need to talk to you." James leaned in closer, his heart racing. He could barely bring himself to speak, the thought of losing her so soon unbearable. He took her frail hand in his, squeezing it gently. "Ava, don't talk like that," he urged, his voice thick with emotion. "You're going to get better. We'll get through this, just like we always do." Ava shook her head, her lips curling into a sad smile. "I wish I could believe that, James, but deep down I know." She trailed off, her words faltering as she struggled to find the strength to continue. "I know my time is running out." James's chest tightened, his breath catching in his throat. He couldn't process what she was saying. He had watched her fight so hard for so many years, had seen her push through pain and heartache with a strength that made her seem invincible. The idea that she was truly slipping away from him was something he couldn't accept. "Please don't say that," James whispered, his voice cracking. "You're my sister. You've been my everything. I can't lose you." Ava's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand in return, though the strength in her grip was weak. "I'm sorry, James," she said, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to leave you like this. I never wanted to leave Olivia without a mother, but I don't have a choice. I can't keep fighting anymore." Tears welled up in James's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He had to be strong for Ava, just as she had always been strong for him. "Ava, please, don't talk like this. You're scaring me," he pleaded, his voice raw with emotion. Ava's gaze turned gentle, though her eyes were filled with the sorrow of a woman who knew she was saying goodbye. "James, I need you to promise me something," she said, her voice faint but filled with urgency. "I need you to promise me that you'll take care of Olivia, my daughter. She'll need you now more than ever. I won't be here to protect her, to guide her. I'm asking you to be there for her, no matter what." The words hit James like a ton of bricks. He had always known how much Ava loved her daughter, how fiercely she had protected Olivia, but to hear her ask him to step into that role, to promise her that he would look after her child, was something that James wasn't ready for. He had always tried to be the strong one, but this was different. This was a responsibility that felt too heavy to bear. "I can't, Ava," James choked out, his voice breaking. "I can't promise you that. I don't know if I'm strong enough. I don't know if I can do it." Ava's expression softened even more, and she reached up with a trembling hand to touch his cheek. "James, you've always been kind. You've always helped others, even when you didn't have much yourself. You're stronger than you think, and I know that you'll take care of her. You won't let her down. You can't." James looked at his sister, tears finally streaming down his face. He had never felt more vulnerable, more helpless in his entire life. He couldn't imagine raising Olivia on his own, being both a father and a mother to her in the way Ava had been. But he also knew that he could never go back on a promise to his sister. He owed her everything, and if this was the last thing she needed from him, he would give it to her without question. With a shaking breath, James nodded, his heart heavy with grief. "I promise, Ava," he whispered, his voice barely audible through the tears. "I promise I'll take care of Olivia. I'll make sure she's safe. I'll be there for her, no matter what." Ava smiled faintly, her eyes closing for a brief moment as she took in a long, slow breath. It was as if she had finally found peace, knowing that her daughter would be in good hands. She didn't need to say anything more. James could feel the weight of her final wish, and he understood that this was the last gift she could give him, her trust, her hope that he would be the one to carry her legacy. That night, as Ava drifted into a peaceful sleep, James sat by her side, holding her hand as he had done so many times before. But this time it was different. This time, he knew that when she woke, it would be for the last time. And so, with a heart full of sorrow but also determination, James made a vow to himself and to Ava. He would never let Olivia feel the emptiness of losing her mother. He would be there for her, just as Ava had always been there for him. He would carry her memory forward and make sure that, despite the pain of losing Ava, their family would survive, and love would find a way to heal the wounds they had suffered. Ava passed away peacefully the following morning, her final wish fulfilled in James's promise. Helping the injured horse. It was a crisp and quiet morning, the kind where fog still lingered low over the fields and the first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon. James had risen early, as he often did, preparing himself for the long day ahead. Olivia, who had insisted on joining him for the morning drive, sat beside him, wrapped snugly in a blanket, her head resting against the window pane. Between them was a peaceful silence, broken only by the occasional chirping of birds and the soft hum of the engine. They drove down a narrow rural road that meandered through farmland and clusters of old oak groves. James's eyes were fixed on the road, though his thoughts were already miles away, rent payments overdue, groceries to buy, Olivia's school fees piling up and the ever-growing cost of everything. These worries had become a constant companion, like a quiet passenger always in the seat next to him. Then, suddenly, Olivia sat up, eyes wide. "Dad, stop the car!" Startled, James hit the brakes. "What is it?" "There, by the side of the road." Olivia's voice trembled with urgency. "It's a horse!" James followed her gaze. There it was, a large chestnut-coloured horse, collapsed in a shallow ditch just off the roadside. Its legs were folded beneath it in a twisted, unnatural way, and its body shivered faintly in pain. A swarm of flies buzzed around a deep, bleeding wound on its hind leg. Its eyes blinked slowly, fluttering with exhaustion. James pulled the truck to the side and stepped out, Olivia close behind. As they approached, the severity of the situation became all too clear. The horse had likely been struck by a vehicle. There were visible signs of road rash along its flank, and the leg injury was swollen and raw. Judging by the state of it, the poor animal had likely lain there for hours, maybe all night, suffering in silence. James crouched beside the creature, slowly reaching out a hand as he murmured softly to soothe it. The horse flinched at first, then relaxed, sensing kindness. James examined the wound, careful and deliberate. "It's bad," he muttered. Olivia knelt beside him, her eyes welling with tears. "We have to help him, Dad." James felt a painful knot form in his throat. "Sweetheart, we can't. Just look at him. He needs a vet, medicine, proper food. We're all ready." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence with her watching. "We can't just leave him here to die," she whispered. He turned to her, and for a moment he truly saw her. She wasn't just asking, she was pleading, and in her eyes was something hauntingly familiar, something that reminded him of Ava. His sister had always told him, "Do the right thing, no matter the cost, be the person you needed when you were young." Those words echoed through him now with painful clarity. He exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. His heart was heavy. Even if we take him, where would we keep him? How would we afford a vet? Olivia's voice was quiet, steady. "Remember what Aunt Ava used to say, that helping someone, even if it's hard, is what makes you a good person." Her words hit him like a hammer to the chest. He looked back at the injured horse, then again to his daughter. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her determination didn't waver. She was so much like her mother, brimming with compassion and quiet strength. And in that moment, James felt a shift. A warmth replaced the heaviness in his chest, a painful, honest kind of warmth. Without a word, he walked back to the truck and retrieved an old blanket from the back seat. Gently, he draped it over the horse's trembling body to preserve its warmth. Then he brought a bottle of water and an empty container, carefully pouring it and placing it by the horse's mouth. The horse drank weakly, grateful for the smallest mercy. James worked instinctively, cleansing the wound as best he could with what little he had. He tore strips from an old t-shirt and fashioned a makeshift bandage. Olivia steadied the horse's head, whispering soothing words the whole time. "We'll need help to move him," James said quietly. "Maybe Mr. Collins down the road?" Olivia offered. "He has a trailer." James nodded. He left her there beside the injured horse and jogged the half-mile to Mr. Collins's farmhouse. The elderly farmer was already awake and, after hearing what had happened, agreed without hesitation. Within the hour, the three of them had carefully and gently lifted the horse into the trailer, doing all they could to avoid causing further harm. Back home, James guided the trailer to an old shed behind their house, the same shed that had once been his father's workshop. It had been sitting mostly empty, filled only with dust, forgotten tools and boxes of old memories. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Together, they cleared the space, laid down fresh straw, and cleaned the area. James built a makeshift stall, while Olivia stayed by the horse's side, never once letting go of his mane. She named him Braveheart because he had survived the night, holding on despite the pain. As James stood back, watching his daughter gently stroke the horse's forehead, something stirred inside him. It wasn't worry. It wasn't guilt. It was pride. A quiet, profound pride. In this single, difficult act of compassion, he saw Ava's spirit. And he saw something else too, something Olivia needed to believe in. Hope. Yes, times were hard. Yes, they barely had enough for themselves. But sometimes doing the right thing meant taking on a burden because someone or something couldn't carry it alone. That night, James sat on the steps of the shed long after Olivia had gone inside. He listened to the soft, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping horse. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, if Braveheart would recover, if they'd find the money for treatment, or if this would all turn out to be a mistake. But deep down, he knew this much. When he looked into his daughter's eyes and saw that spark, the same spark Ava once carried, it was all worth it. He whispered into the stillness of the night, "We'll figure it out, Braveheart. You're safe now." And in that quiet moment, it almost felt like Ava was there too, smiling. From the very first day Hope arrived at their home, something began to shift in the air around the small household. The once quiet and often heavy atmosphere that hung over James and Olivia's lives started to feel a little lighter. The shed, now transformed into a makeshift stable, echoed with gentle neighs and the soft thuds of hooves rather than silence. Hope, the injured horse they had once found broken and helpless on the side of the road, had become more than just a rescued animal. She was now family. James had chosen the name Hope because that's what the horse represented. A fragile, flickering kind of hope that refused to be extinguished even in the darkest circumstances. And as Hope slowly healed, her wounds mending, her spirit returning, it felt as though the family was healing too. For Olivia, Hope was more than a companion. She was someone to talk to when the world felt too heavy or quiet. Each morning before school, Olivia would wake up early, slip on her boots, and rush to the stable to check on Hope. She would brush her coat, whisper good morning in her ear, and feed her oats and carrots she saved from her own lunch. And every afternoon, as soon as school ended, Olivia would run back to the stable to be with her again. At first, Olivia would simply sit beside Hope, talking to her as if she were an old friend. She told her stories about school, about missing her mom, about the dreams she still held on to. Hope listened in her own way, her ears flicking, eyes soft, her presence constant and comforting. Slowly, as the weeks passed, Olivia began leading Hope out into the open field behind their house. The walks turned into trots. And then one sunny afternoon, Hope gently bowed her head as if inviting Olivia to climb on her back. It was a moment neither of them would ever forget. From that day forward, Olivia spent her evenings riding Hope around the field. They moved in sync, like two souls who understood each other without needing words. Laughter returned to Olivia's life, bright and unrestrained, carried on the wind as she galloped freely, Hope's mane flying, her hooves pounding the earth like a heartbeat. It was freedom, trust, and healing wrapped into one. James watched all of this from a distance. Every now and then, as he came home from a long shift, tired and worn from juggling multiple jobs, he'd catch sight of Olivia riding Hope across the fading golden light of the field. And each time he'd pause, his arms still heavy with grocery bags, his shirt clinging to his back with sweat, and smile. There was something deeply reassuring in knowing Olivia had someone, even if that someone had 4 legs and a tail. James knew he couldn't give Olivia everything. No expensive vacations, no shiny gifts, not even consistent time together with all the work he had to do to keep the lights on. But hope had filled a space he hadn't realized was empty. She gave Olivia joy, confidence, and most of all, responsibility. It was that last part that surprised James the most. Olivia had always been kind-hearted, but now she was growing into someone more dependable, more mature. She took her duties with Hope seriously. Rain or shine, tired or sick, she never missed a feeding, never skipped a brushing. She even began researching how to care for horses better, borrowing books from the school library and watching videos when the internet signal allowed. One evening, James came home and found a list on the fridge. Written in Olivia's neat handwriting, it read, Hope's weekly schedule. Morning feed, 6:30 a.m., grooming, 7 a.m., light walk after school, evening feed, 6 p.m., talk time, just me and her, before bed. James chuckled softly as he read it. Talk time, he repeated aloud with a shake of his head. It was exactly the kind of thing Ava would have encouraged, caring, imaginative, intentional. He could almost hear his sister's voice in the back of his mind, smiling as she said, See? She's learning to love deeply, just like we did. Hope wasn't just a horse anymore. She had woven herself into the fabric of their everyday life. When James had a tough day, he sometimes found himself stopping by the stable just to run his hand over her mane or stand silently near her. The quiet presence of Hope had become a balm for all of them. And so, what had started as a hesitant decision, a financial risk, a spontaneous act of kindness, had become one of the most meaningful parts of their lives. Hope was no longer a burden. She was a blessing, a connection to something gentler, something healing. A reminder that sometimes the heart makes decisions that the head can't always justify, but those are the decisions that change everything. In her own quiet, steadfast way, Hope had brought them back to life. Together, the 3 of them, James, Olivia, and Hope, were becoming a real family again. The Goldsteve family's search, the arrival. The sound of the helicopter grew louder, slicing through the morning stillness like a blade. James was already outside, his instincts on edge, while Olivia, curious and wide-eyed, had run out behind him barefoot, holding her little sweater around her shoulders. Hope, the horse, stood nervously by the stable, her ears twitching with each heavy rotation of the blades. James placed a protective hand on Olivia's shoulder. The helicopter descended with precision, its wind whipping dust and loose hay into small clouds around them. It finally touched down on the open patch just outside their house, an expensive-looking aircraft, jet black with a silver crest that shimmered in the light. James squinted, immediately aware that this was not a casual visit. As the door slid open, a tall, clean-shaven man in a dark blazer stepped out. He wore the kind of confidence that came from years of working in security or private service. He looked around the modest property, his eyes taking everything in. Hope, the fences, the little red truck in the driveway, and finally James and Olivia standing side by side. "You the owner here?" the man asked, his voice loud enough to rise over the settling blades. James stepped forward, his voice calm. "I live here, yes. Can I help you?" The man's gaze drifted toward the stable. "We're looking for a missing horse, a very important one. We were told someone saw a horse matching her description being cared for here." James took a breath and nodded. "I found her, weeks ago. She was injured badly, lying by the side of the highway. My daughter and I brought her home." The man didn't respond immediately. He studied James for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then he turned and walked back to the helicopter. From the shadows inside the aircraft, a figure emerged. She stepped down slowly, one hand resting on the doorframe for balance, the other clutching the side of her coat as if steadying her breath. Her presence was quiet, graceful, but commanding. Her blonde hair was pinned neatly, her eyes covered by dark sunglasses that she now took off, revealing deep, searching eyes that had clearly cried more than once in recent days. James froze, and so did she. For a moment, the wind and dust faded into the background as if time itself had paused. James and the woman locked eyes, and the distance between them dissolved. There was something unspoken between them, recognition, history, emotion that ran far deeper than Olivia could understand. Jennifer Goldsteve. Her lips trembled slightly as she looked at him. James felt his heart punch against his chest. He hadn't heard her name spoken aloud in years, and yet here she was, standing just steps away from his front porch, looking as though she'd walked out of a forgotten chapter of his life. Olivia turned to him, puzzled. "Dad, who is she?" Before he could answer, a uniformed bodyguard stepped closer, breaking the stillness. "Ma'am," he said to Jennifer, "should I ask for his information?" Jennifer raised her hand gently, stopping him, and spoke for the first time, her voice almost a whisper. "What's your name?" she asked, her eyes never leaving James's. He cleared his throat, suddenly conscious of Olivia standing beside him. "James Vince." The name hung in the air like a spark. Jennifer's eyes welled up immediately. She looked down for a moment, composing herself, then back at him with a smile that trembled with emotion. James, trying to keep his voice steady, looked at his daughter, who was watching them both with wide, confused eyes. "I'll explain everything later," he whispered to her gently. "I promise." But Olivia wouldn't let it go. "You know her, don't you? You know her." James knelt down beside his daughter and brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. "Yes, I do, but this isn't the time. Just give me a little while, sweetheart." Jennifer walked slowly toward them now. Every step carried weight, history, and a strange mix of sorrow and peace. Hope, standing nearby, neighed softly and stepped forward, recognizing her former companion. Jennifer turned toward the horse and smiled through her tears, but her gaze quickly returned to James. There were no grand words, no dramatic gestures, just a moment, fragile and quiet between two people with a shared past, both standing at a crossroads they never saw coming. And in that moment, beneath the soft whir of the helicopter blades still cooling in the breeze, everything began to shift. The mystery of Jennifer. Later that evening, after the plates were cleared and the lights dimmed low in the modest home, Olivia couldn't hold her curiosity back any longer. She sat across from her father, James, as the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Her cocoa had long gone cold in her hands, but her thoughts were stirring, too loud to ignore. "Dad," she began, her voice almost a whisper, "who is Jennifer?" James didn't look up. He sat at the kitchen table, his broad shoulders slightly hunched, his fingers interlocked tightly on the wooden surface. The question seemed to hang in the air like a fog. He blinked slowly, once, then again, but said nothing. "I saw the way she looked at you," Olivia added, "and the way you looked back at her." Still, James offered no response. He exhaled deeply and reached for his coffee mug, taking a slow sip. Then, softly, he said, "Sometimes, Liv, there are people from the past who come back when you least expect them, and sometimes it's not the right moment to explain everything." Olivia frowned, disappointed but not surprised. She had grown used to her father's silences, to the way he often buried his thoughts beneath layers of quiet. She gave a small nod, though the ache of unanswered questions lingered in her chest. She stood and quietly headed to her room, casting one last glance at James, who remained seated, staring into the bottom of his cup as if searching for something he'd lost long ago. The following morning dawned grey and gentle. Mist clung to the fields like a soft veil, and the breeze rustled the tall grass outside the windows. The scent of damp earth and fresh dew filled the air. James was already up, lacing his boots by the door, dressed in his worn work jacket and faded jeans. "Don't forget to eat something," he reminded Olivia, who was still half asleep in her oversized sweater, rubbing her eyes as she stood in the living room. "I won't," she mumbled, watching as he grabbed his lunchbox and stepped out the door. The screen door creaked shut behind him, and Olivia wandered over to the window, staring out across the fields. Hope, the gentle mare James had rescued not long ago, grazed peacefully in the nearby paddock, her tail swishing lazily. Then something strange caught Olivia's eye. A sleek black Rolls-Royce was gliding up the dirt path toward their home. The polished body of the car gleamed even beneath the dull sky, its silver trim catching the light. It moved with quiet elegance, entirely out of place against the rustic backdrop of wild grass and wooden fences. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened as the car came to a smooth, deliberate stop just outside the front gate. She stepped away from the window, heart beating faster. Hope lifted her head too, ears flicking forward, sensing something or someone. The driver's door opened, and a man in a sharp black uniform stepped out. He moved to the back of the car and opened the rear passenger door. From within emerged Jennifer Goldsteve. She looked striking, dressed in a sleek black coat that hugged her tall frame. Her blonde hair was pulled into a graceful bun, and her sunglasses framed her face like something out of a movie. Pearl earrings shimmered subtly beneath the cloudy sky. Jennifer stood still for a moment, scanning the surroundings. Then her gaze settled on Olivia, who stood barefoot in the doorway, stunned and silent. Jennifer approached with a graceful stride, her heels making only the faintest crunch on the gravel. "Olivia," she said warmly, removing her sunglasses. Olivia blinked, still unsure if she was dreaming. "You must be Olivia," Jennifer repeated, her voice smooth and gentle. Olivia tilted her head, hesitant. "How do you know my name?" Jennifer smiled softly and stepped a little closer. "Because, a long time ago, your father told me that if he ever had a daughter, he'd name her Olivia." The words hung in the air like a spell. Olivia's eyes widened. "He told you that?" she asked, voice barely audible. Jennifer gave a small nod and knelt slightly so she could be closer to Olivia's eye level. "And he was right. You are just as sweet and precious as he imagined you would be." Still confused, Olivia glanced behind her, half expecting her father to appear and explain everything. But he was gone. It was just her, and this stranger who didn't feel quite like a stranger at all. Then Jennifer reached into her sleek handbag and pulled out a small box wrapped in pale pink paper, tied neatly with a ribbon. "This is for you," she said. Olivia took the gift slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at Jennifer, unsure if she should open it. Jennifer gave a reassuring nod. Inside, nestled in soft white velvet, was a delicate silver charm bracelet. It sparkled in the dim morning light, each charm crafted with care. Among them was a tiny horse. "It's beautiful," Olivia whispered. At that exact moment, Hope neighed softly and trotted over from the field, hooves thudding softly on the ground. She moved straight to Jennifer without hesitation and nuzzled her side with a soft, affectionate whinny. Jennifer turned with a smile and gently stroked Hope's mane. The horse leaned into her touch, comforted and content. Olivia watched, mouth slightly open. Her heart pounded with wonder. "She remembers you," Olivia said, barely believing it herself. "Why does she like you so much?" Jennifer turned back to her, her eyes misting just a little. "Because," she said quietly, "sometimes animals remember kindness. And sometimes they remember the people who once loved them deeply." Olivia looked from Jennifer to the bracelet in her hand, then to Hope, her thoughts swirling with 1,000 questions she didn't yet know how to ask. And before she could speak again, Jennifer reached out and gave her a gentle, heartfelt hug. She whispered close, "I'll be seeing you again, Olivia." And just like that, she turned and walked gracefully back toward the car, leaving behind only questions, the scent of warm perfume, and the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much deeper. Olivia's confusion. The sun hadn't even fully risen when James was already tugging on his boots, exhaustion written all over his face. He gave Olivia a quick kiss on the forehead, his mind clearly preoccupied with the weight of the bills piling up and the double shifts ahead of him. "Dad, are you okay?" Olivia asked, noticing how tired his eyes looked. "I'm fine, sweetheart," James replied, forcing a smile as he grabbed his keys. "Just got to get to work, that's all. Be good, okay? And don't forget to feed Hope." She nodded and hugged him tightly. He smelled faintly of coffee and the worn leather of his jacket. "Bye, Dad. Love you." "I love you too, kiddo," he said, stepping out into the chilly morning. Later that afternoon, Olivia was in the backyard with Hope. The young horse had taken well to her, nudging her with his muzzle as she giggled, and tried to braid the little strands of his mane with wildflowers. The quiet companionship between the girl and the rescued horse had become something healing, gentle, simple, and pure. She was mid-giggle when the sound of tires crunching over gravel made her pause. She looked up, squinting into the sunlight. It was the same sleek car from yesterday. Jennifer. The shiny black car door opened, and out stepped Jennifer again, looking as elegant and mysterious as ever. She had a soft smile on her face, though her eyes seemed clouded with something Olivia couldn't quite understand. "Hello again, Olivia," Jennifer said gently, walking toward the girl with a small gift bag in one hand and a box of chocolates in the other. Olivia looked around, unsure. "Hi, my dad's not home right now." "That's okay," Jennifer replied, kneeling slightly to be on Olivia's level. "I just wanted to bring you something, for being so kind and brave." She handed Olivia the bag, which had a new set of sketch pens and a little notebook with a horse printed on the front. The chocolates were her favourite kind, too. The kind her dad rarely bought because they were too fancy and expensive. Olivia looked at the gifts, then back at Jennifer. "Are you a friend of my dad's?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment, then gave a soft smile. "Something like that." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. "Can you do me a favour?" she asked, her voice suddenly a little more serious. Olivia nodded. "Give this to your dad, but don't tell him it was from me. Just say someone dropped it off." Olivia blinked, her small fingers wrapping around the envelope. "Okay," she said hesitantly. Jennifer placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're a good girl, Olivia. Take care of your dad, okay?" Before Olivia could ask anything else, Jennifer stood up, walked briskly back to her car and drove off without another word. Even as Olivia went back to playing with Hope, the encounter sat strangely with her. Something about Jennifer felt both warm and sad at the same time, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to speak aloud. When James came home later that night, he looked more exhausted than usual. His shoulders slumped as he kicked off his boots and set his worn backpack down. "Hey, Pumpkin!" he called out as he stepped into the living room, spotting Olivia curled up with her new toy horse and the chocolates nearly gone. "Looks like someone had a good day." Olivia ran up to hug him. "Dad, someone came by today." He tensed slightly. "Who?" "I don't know," she said, her voice innocent and truthful. "She was nice, gave me gifts and this." She held out the envelope. James frowned, taking it from her hands. It felt heavy. He tore the flap open and his eyes widened. Inside was a thick stack of cash, neatly bound and totaling $30,000. He didn't say a word for a long moment, just stood there, frozen, staring at the money. "Olivia," he finally said, his voice low, almost cautious, "who gave this to you?" She looked up, confused but honest. "I told you. I don't know her name. She just said to give it to you and not to say who she was." James sank into the couch, the envelope still in his hands. His mind raced. Who would leave that kind of money? And why? His first thought was something illegal, but there was no note, no explanation, no threats, just money. Was it charity? A gift? A trap? His instincts told him it was more than just generosity. "Did she say anything else?" he asked. Olivia shook her head slowly. "She told me to take care of you, and that I'm brave." James felt a strange chill settle into his bones. Someone out there was watching, someone who knew more than they were saying. He looked at Olivia, so innocent, so trusting, and gently pulled her close. "Thanks for giving it to me, sweetheart," he whispered. "You did good." But inside his thoughts churned. Who is she? Why would someone give me this kind of money? What does she want in return? As Olivia nestled beside him, holding on to the toy horse Jennifer had brought, James stared at the envelope once more. And in that quiet living room, with nothing but the soft sound of the heater humming in the background, he made a silent vow. Whatever this is, I'm going to find out. The revelation. James couldn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on the edge of the kitchen counter like a ghost refusing to disappear. Every few minutes he would glance at it, his thoughts spiraling into endless questions. $30,000 wasn't a casual favor. It was a statement, a message. And the longer he stared at the pristine bills and that subtle floral scent still clinging to the paper, the more one name kept surfacing in his mind. Jennifer Goldsteve. He hadn't heard that name in years, at least not spoken in his home. The last time he saw her was during a corporate fundraiser event he'd worked security for. She hadn't noticed him then, or maybe she had and just pretended not to. She always carried herself with that high society poise, like she belonged to a world far removed from the one he was fighting to survive in. So why now? Why Olivia? And why this money? The next morning, James sat at the small dining table, staring at the now open envelope again, hoping for a hidden note he might have missed. something to explain Jennifer's intentions. Olivia padded into the kitchen, still in her pyjamas, her hair tousled and Hope's horse plushie tucked under her arm. She climbed into the chair across from him and reached for an apple. "Dad," she said, chewing thoughtfully, "are you okay?" James looked up, startled. He hadn't realized how pale and tense he must have seemed. "Yeah, just thinking." She kicked her feet under the table. "About the envelope?" He hesitated, a little. "I told you," she said, swallowing her bite. "It was just that nice lady again. She looked sad, but she gave me toys and said you needed that money." That clenched it. Jennifer. It had to be her. James rubbed his face with both hands. "Did she say anything else?" Olivia furrowed her brows, trying to remember. "Just that I'm brave, and to take care of you." James's heart squeezed. The way Olivia said it, with so much innocence, only added to his unease. He wasn't used to this kind of help. Life had taught him that nothing came without a price. Just as he opened his mouth to say something, Olivia asked a question that caught him completely off guard. "Dad," she said softly, eyes wide and searching, "who would just accept us like this?" Her voice held no bitterness, just curiosity, a quiet wondering from a child who'd grown up watching her dad struggle, who knew not everyone was kind or generous. James blinked, stunned for a moment. That one question landed harder than anything. He forced a small smile, trying not to let her see the weight of his thoughts. "Sometimes people do things without expecting anything back," he said carefully. "It's rare, but it happens." "Do you believe that?" she asked. James didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached across the table and held her hand gently. "I want to," he said finally. "I really do." But deep down, the question still echoed louder than ever. "Why now, Jennifer? And what do you really want from us?" James's confrontation with Jennifer. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the quiet street. James stood at the corner near the edge of his home, pretending to head to work, but instead he hid behind a row of shrubs with a clear view of his front porch. His heart was racing, and his mind wrestled with thoughts that had kept him up all night. He had to know the truth. No more games, no more confusion. Today he would confront Jennifer face to face. Time ticked slowly until finally the sleek black Rolls-Royce appeared at the end of the road, just like the day before. James's breath caught in his chest. The car pulled up quietly, its presence both elegant and imposing. The door opened, and there she was, Jennifer Goldsteve. She stepped out gracefully, holding a small box wrapped in silver paper and a bouquet of wildflowers. She looked around, then spotted Olivia playing with Hope in the yard. A soft smile touched her lips as she called gently, "Olivia, sweetheart." Before Olivia could run to her, James stepped out from behind the hedges. "Stop right there," he said firmly, his voice trembling with restrained emotion. Jennifer froze, startled. "James." He walked toward her slowly. His eyes locked onto hers. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice low and tight. "Why now, after all these years?" Jennifer's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm here for Olivia," she whispered. "And for you." James's jaw clenched. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to walk into our lives like nothing happened. I'm happy with my daughter. Please, just leave us. Go back to your world, your family, your wealth, your perfect life. Go back to where you belong." Jennifer stepped forward, her voice breaking. "James, I couldn't marry anyone else. I never stopped loving you." He looked away, his chest tightening. "Then why, Jennifer?" he asked hoarsely. "Why did you leave me? Why did you abandon this little angel, our daughter? And now you say you love me. Now?" Tears streamed down Jennifer's cheeks. "I didn't leave because I wanted to. My family, they wouldn't accept Olivia. I fought for you, for her, for us, but they refused. I tried so many times, James. I tried, but they threatened to cut me off. They told me I'd lose everything, and I was scared. I was so scared." James's eyes welled with tears, but he nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry I put you in that position. I never should have let you carry that burden alone. I just wanted to protect our daughter. I never meant to shut you out." Jennifer took a shaky step closer. "I don't care about the money or the status anymore. I just want to be with you. With Olivia." Unable to hold back, James dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by everything. The years of silence, the pain of raising Olivia alone, the ache of missing Jennifer every single day. "I missed you," he choked. "I missed you so much. I never stopped loving you either." Jennifer knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his trembling frame as tears poured freely from both of them. They clung to each other, as if trying to make up for all the lost time with a single embrace. Years of unspoken pain, regret, and longing collapsed into that one moment of reunion. Just then Olivia walked over, clutching Hope's reins. She looked at them, puzzled but curious. "Dad, do you know Miss Jennifer?" James looked up at his daughter, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. He smiled through the pain and love swelling in his chest. "Not Miss Jennifer," he said softly, standing and pulling her close. "Your mom? Yeah, I know her. I've always known her." Olivia gasped, her eyes lighting up. "She's my mom." James nodded, and Jennifer opened her arms wide. "Yes, baby, I've loved you every single day from afar, and I'm here now, if you'll let me be." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. She ran into her mother's arms, burying her face in her chest. "I always dreamed of you," she whispered. "I always hoped you'd come." Hope neighed beside them, as if sensing the joy in the air. With a playful toss of his mane, the horse did a little gallop in circles, his hooves tapping against the ground in a clumsy, joyful rhythm, his version of a dance. The little family stood there, embraced, finally whole. After all the heartache, after all the years lost in silence and sorrow, love had found its way back, and in that moment they were no longer broken. They were home. The lesson of this story is about the power of kindness, compassion, and doing what's right, even when the circumstances seem impossible. James, a struggling single dad, proves that even in the face of personal hardship, helping others, whether a wounded animal or a person in need, can lead to unexpected rewards. His selflessness not only saves the life of an injured